Assalamualaikum and greetings everyone. I'm Noreen Adriana binti Yusuf, first semester student of LG240. The topic I will be presenting today is verb. Now, let's get into it. As we can see here are all the 6 types of verbs we are going to cover today. So we have intransitive verbs, transitive verbs, linking verbs, VG verbs, VC verbs, and last but not least, B verbs. Now, let's take a look at the first type of verbs, that is intransitive verbs. So, what is intransitive verbs? Intransitive verbs mean that the action in the verb does not transfer onto some object, which means that there is no direct object. Intransitive verbs can either end a sentence or followed by adverbs. Now, let's take a look at the examples below. Birds fly and Garfield slept. These are two instances of intransitive verbs that can end sentences. These sentences show that they are not followed by other words. However, like I said before, intransitive verbs don't have to end sentences. They may be followed by adverbs that answer questions like how, where, why, when, and how often. For example, the baby panda cried softly. The intransitive verb cried is followed by the word adverb softly. This adverb tells you how the action cried is done. Same goes to the second example. The audience laughed loudly. Loudly is an adverb that tells you how the action laughed is done. In the third row shows the examples of intransitive verbs that has prepositional phrases that act like adverbs. For example, the Titanic sank in 1912 and the stuntman jumped from the third floor balcony. In 1912 and from the third floor balcony are prepositional phrases that followed the intransitive verbs and indicating when and where the actions are done. In our last row is an example of an intransitive verb that must be followed by adverbs. For example, Cadillac's seating system acts like a shock absorber. You can't say Cadillac's seating system acts and just end the sentence there without the adverb phrase like a shock absorber, because that would be ungrammatical. Hence, why acts is an intransitive verb that must be followed by adverbs. Now that intransitive verb is done, let's head over to our next verb, that is transitive verbs. Transitive verbs differ from intransitive verbs because they must be followed by noun phrases that function as direct objects. So, transitive is the action of the verb is transferred onto the object. For further comprehension, the direct object of a transitive verb has something done to it by the subject. Now, let's look at the examples. The lady typed the letter. The lady, as a subject, did something to the letter as the direct object through the actions of typing. Same goes for the other two examples. President Snow supported the tax reduction. President Snow, as subject, did something to the tax reduction through the action of supporting. Coyotes killed the sheep. Coyotes, as the subject, did something to the sheep through the action of killing. All these direct objects are acted upon by the subjects. Other than that, another way to identify transitive verbs is that they can be turned into passive sentence, like the letter was typed by the lady. The tax reduction was supported by President Snow, and the sheep was killed by coyotes. So, if the sentence can be made passive, you can be sure the verb is transitive. Now, let's move on to the next verb, which is linking verbs. Linking verb is only followed by either predicate noun or predicate adjectives, because it's either a noun phrase or an adjective phrase. If it's a noun phrase, it refers to the same person or thing as the subject, and if it's an adjective phrase, it describes the subject. The tables show the linking verb, which comprised of a few verbs like seem, remain, appear, become, turn, and state, and verbs of the senses like feel, look, smell, sound, and taste. First, let's look at sentences that are followed by adjectives. The cheese turned rancid. Mom's lasagna tasted scrumptious. Turn and taste are both linking verb, and rancid and scrumptious are adjectives that characterize the cheese and mom's lasagna, which made both sentences have predicate adjectives. As for the linking verb followed by noun phrase, Taylor Swift remained a global artist. Emma Watson becomes Hermione Granger. Taylor Swift and a top global artist are the same person, and so are Emma Watson and Hermione Granger. The noun phrase made them sentences with predicate nouns. Now, on to the next verb. VG verbs. VG verbs are two place-transitive verbs that must be followed by both indirect object and direct object. The G in VG stands for give, because VG verbs create a scenario of giving and receiving, like there are something that is given and received in the sentence. The subject gives the direct object to the indirect object, which means that the indirect object is receiving the direct object. You get it? Now let's look at the example. The school board gave the teachers a raise. Gave is the VG verb. The teachers is the indirect object and a raise is the direct object. Same goes to all the other VG verbs too, like bought, fed, provides, sent, they all work the same way. However, VG verbs sentences have alternate form where the noun phrase can be rearranged by placing the indirect object in a prepositional phrase introduced by to or for. So, look at the bottom of this slide. These are the examples of VG verbs with prepositional phrase. The school board gave a raise to the teachers. The billionaire bought a penthouse for her daughter. Notice how the indirect object remain the receivers of the direct object? This just shows that VG verbs have both direct and indirect object. Our next verb is VC verbs. The C in VC verbs stands for consider, which frequently used to help identify this verb type. VC verbs are two place transitives, followed first by direct objects, then object complements, such as noun phrases, adjective phrases, or infinitive phrases. In the first example, Swifties consider Taylor Swift a lyrical genius. Taylor Swift, a noun phrase functioning as direct object, which then followed by a lyrical genius, another noun phrase, as an object complements. In the second example, Stranger Things fans consider Noah Schnapp ignorant. Consider is followed by Noah Schnapp, a direct object, then followed by the adjective ignorant as the object complement. Again, same goes for the third one, except that the to be his best friend is an infinitive phrase as the object complements. From Style Stilinsky considers Scott McCall to be his best friend. This applies to all other VC verbs, like the other ones I provided as examples, like things, deem, found, nickname, they all work exactly the same. Here, we can accomplish that VC verbs have all three part in predicates, which is a verb, a direct object, and an object complement. Finally, last but not least of the verb types is be verbs. Be verbs is followed by either a noun phrase, an adjective phrase, or an adverb of place. These are the 8 forms of be verbs. Be, is, are, am, was, were, been, being. Here are the examples for noun phrase, adjective phrase, and adverbs of place. The Conjuring is the classic horror film. Is the be verb. The classic horror film is a noun phrase that followed the be verb. For adjective phrase, Marilyn Monroe was insecure. Was is a be verb followed by an adjective insecure. For verb of place, my mother was in the next room. Was is the be verb. In the next room is adverb of place that followed the be verb. This verb, be verb, concluded the 6 types of verbs we are covering in the topic of verb. Thank you for lending your ears, and with that, thank you.